It's waiting for everybody to connect and come in. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Bayakin, and I'm privileged to be president of Harvard GlobalWE. I'm so excited to welcome all of you to the Harvard GlobalWE 10th Anniversary Retrospective panel today. Please type in the chat where you're joining us from. And kindly note, we are recording today so that we can share this event via our social media platforms. Harvard GlobalWE, as most of you already know, is a shared interest group of the Harvard Alumni Association that has just passed its 10-year mark as of October 2023, just last month. We are dedicated to the empowerment of women through education, dialogue, and connection among individuals working for women's rights and freedoms worldwide. We highlight and raise awareness about issues concerning women's empowerment worldwide, including, but not limited to, education, political rights, freedom from violence, women's health, and economic empowerment. Our board of directors is as global as our interests, with representatives in the US, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Okay, in fact, I'm originally from the Philippines and currently live in the Chicago area, as says our vice president, Barbara. Our secretary-elect, Ariette, is in the Poconos area of Pennsylvania. Our treasurer, Eric, is in Las Vegas. Sajida, our chair for strategy and our liaison for advisory council, is Canadian, but currently in Dubai. Our programs chair, Arti, lives in India. Marketing chair, Lisa, is in Atlanta, Georgia. Our partnerships and development chair, Janina, our website chair, Doyon, and Connect chair, Anna, are all in California. And chairs for membership, Kendall, and for essay contest, Julie, are also in Chicago. And our essay contest co-chair, Rachel, is based in Turkey. So now, knowing our locations, you'll understand why we had been meeting as a team over Zoom long before the pandemic started, and before that on Hangouts, in case any of you remember that app. We've again been able to start coming together in small groups just this past year during our annual expo in the spring and the Alumni Leadership Conference last month, both on the Harvard University campus. And given that we are celebrating a milestone this year, we're eagerly working on a board retreat in 2024. We hope that GlobalWE has been a valued resource and a community for you over the past decade, or whatever portion of the time that you've been with us. We also welcome your engagement as a volunteer with GlobalWE, and in fact, we currently have several openings. If you are interested, please email us to learn more, or check out our wonderful 10th anniversary webpage, which will soon transition into our new and improved GlobalWE website, and that will give you details for how to join us and volunteer with us. We also welcome your financial support. It's the only way for us to continue and to grow. So please consider making a gift in honor of anniversary and to ensure the next 10 years of GlobalWE that they continue. Donations can be made by clicking on the Donate tab on our website, where you can donate using a credit card or find the information for other payment methods. And then let's move to our other goals for today. Harvard GlobalWE welcomes all participants to this conversation. And even though today we'll be hearing from presidents and board members, we'd also like to hear from our members on your reflections about GlobalWE. Please type in your questions in the chat. Feel free to respond there, as well as to the questions being asked for our speakers. And if something occurs to you after today, please email us as well. We hope to share member statements or recordings on our 10th anniversary webpage so you can be part of the celebration. And if this event sparks conversations tomorrow with colleagues and classmates, we'll count that as a success. If just 2 people connect today who will support our mission, we've succeeded. And if just 10 of you sign up to volunteer and or donate, we've succeeded. We're so grateful for all the wonderful support we've received from SIGs and clubs, as well as AJA, in helping us get out the word about today. And we're very thankful for the wonderful GlobalWE student group for their support as well. So now let's take a moment to take a screenshot. So please turn on your cameras if you're comfortable having your picture shared by our social media on GlobalWE. I'm having Anna and Kendall take care of that. Okay, let us know. Are we good?
We're good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So we are just so grateful to be looking back on 10 years, and we feel very privileged to be able to also anticipate the next 10 with your continued support. So now let's move on. I'd like to introduce Chuck Bergen, who's going to be our moderator for today's conversation with board members and presidents, past and present. Chuck is a valued member of the Advisory Council of Harvard GlobalWE and a longtime member and supporter of our SIG. He currently serves as a director of the Harvard Alumni Association with responsibilities for the Harvard clubs in the Western Great Lakes region. During his past tenure as president of the Harvard Club of Chicago, that club and our SIG frequently collaborated in events, and he even served as moderator for one of our previous events. He's a dear friend to many of the individuals featured in today's dialogue. Please join me in welcoming Chuck.
Well, thank you, Leah. And it's pleasure to be here with all of you. It's an honor to help with this event. This is a huge milestone for GlobalWE, and I think we're all looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the past and a little bit more about the future, where the founders and the current people on the board see this going. For all of you who've joined us from really all over the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. I'm honored to be part of this celebration. We're going to have two panels today telling us about GlobalWE. Our first group of speakers will talk about the beginnings and how this all began. In the first panel today will be the founding president and a good friend of mine for Harvard GlobalWE, Julie Palmer. We've served together on the Harvard Club of Chicago board as well, and she's been a good friend for a long time. I was honored. I think the first thing I got to do on the advisory board was to look at a disclaimer for the trip to South America and make sure that GlobalWE wasn't going to get into any trouble. And that was my introduction, and I haven't looked back. It's been great fun since then. We'll also have on this panel we'll have Paul Scheid and we'll have Rebecca Robato, both of whom were key members early on and continue to be active with GlobalWE. So, you know, I'm eager to hear what they have to say and tell us a little about the past. Julie, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the early stages, set the stage for the formation of GlobalWE, and tell us a little bit about your initial vision?
So GlobalWE was inspired by a trip to Istanbul in 2012, July 2012, when I was with my family and we were in the Hagia Sophia, which maybe Anna will show the picture. Probably many of you have been there. It's the most magnificent, awe-inspiring structure. And at that time, it was a museum. It was filled with tourists. And we were taking lots of photographs. And I saw this man in there's a photograph of the beautiful, now it's a mosque. And it has throughout history been a mosque, a church, a museum, and now it's back to a mosque. We were taking photographs and I saw a man with his son, and they were both wearing shorts and white shirts because it was a hot day. And they waved a woman over to join the photographs, and she was covered head to toe in all black with only her eyes showing. And I had so many questions about what it must be like for this woman, whether she chose to be covered, whether she was covered by cultural mores, and whether she was hot, how she felt being in the photograph. And so then the trip moved on, and I came home and I kept thinking about this woman. It was always on my mind, and I would talk about it wherever I went. And I met first a young woman, Benyana Garaziu, who I don't know if she's on the call today, but she is one of my co-founders. And I was telling her this story, and she told me about some of her family history from Albania. And she shared my interest in exploring the challenges that women are facing around the world. And then I met Jen Chertow, who was a medical student at the time. And her particular study project was female genital mutilation in Somalian refugees in the US. And so she also was very interested in this same topic. And in preparation for today's panel, I looked back and I saw that we shared an email. This was in February of 2013, in which I said, I'm interested in establishing a Harvard special interest group devoted to promoting women's rights in communities where women do not have much freedom or power, and exploring the challenges that women are facing around the world. And they were all in. And so that's where it took off.
When you began, did you immediately become a SIG, or was this something that developed over time as more people came to the group?
Well, I think we were talking about how we, as privileged Harvard alumni, could deploy the influential Harvard alumni around the world to connect around this mission. And so, we had heard about SIGs. SIGs they weren't new then, but they were sort of growing, they were exploding. Yeah. And so we thought, well, that could be one way to get this going.
So let me ask a couple of the other early members, Rebecca and Paul. Each of you, could you talk about your early involvement and what attracted you to the group and what the early days were like? Rebecca, why don't you start?
Sure. So I'm trying to think when I met Julie we had met much earlier, but we met for, I think, coffee. And Julie, I think it was late 2013, early 2014, and Julie shared her vision. And I was really taken by the idea mainly of focusing on women globally. There'd been a lot of focus, and in my entire Harvard career, I wrote a thesis on gender representation in the media over a 10-year period. I focused a lot on women in the United States. And I was incredibly curious about women's rights and freedoms and education and healthcare outside of the United States. And so Julie's vision really spoke to me. On a personal level, my grandmother grew up in Smyrna, Turkey. My grandfather's family was from Sivas, which was interior to Turkey. My godmother, my godfather's mother, was a child during the Armenian genocide, and she was taken into an orphanage, and she became the bride of a soldier, a Turkish soldier, and had some children. And eventually the Red Cross brought her back to the United States, and I grew up with her stories. It's a very difficult story. And that story spoke to me as well. That's something I really wanted to explore historically as well. Women in different parts of the world during war, conflict, and different cultures. So that's kind of my background, both academically and from my family.
Interesting. Paul, what about you? What attracted you to GlobalWE in the early days?
So I initially heard about GlobalWE from Benyana, who Julie mentioned, and it was kind of a great, very Harvard connection in a lot of ways. I, at the time, was part of the leadership of a news magazine on campus and had kind of recognized that that organization has some issues with gender parity. And so it being Harvard, there's someone studying everything. And so we found a grad student who was studying gender disparity in Harvard student organizations. And so I had kind of talked to that person to try to help the organization I was part of improve on this issue. And Benyana was at the time part of the Women in Business group and was organizing a conference and had a speaker back out at the last minute. Benyana and I were friends and had been throughout college. And so we were kind of talking about this, and I said, oh, well, you should talk to this grad student who's doing this really interesting research. And it was kind of a great, almost, a precursor of what's great about GlobalWE is it's such a multifaceted area, such a multifaceted issue that, my interest in the topic came from, this very specific, kind of organizational dynamics. I also was really, and still am interested in international development, which is a space where you can't be a part of for more than 30 seconds without realizing the importance of women's empowerment. And so, this kind of international element, the domestic element, whether it's in a student group or business like Benyana was working on. So that when she came to me and said, I'm starting this group, we had previously talked about these issues, and I was really excited to join. you asked kind of in your intro to this, Chuck, what the early days were like.
Yeah.
And the early days were a lot of fun. They were scrappy. We were figuring things out as we went. But it was awesome because you have so many interesting people in the Harvard community, and everyone was really excited to come together and hold different events and start different projects. So it was a really exciting time.
Yeah, I imagine with the formation. So, Julie, let me swing back to you. What were the early challenges that the organization had to face, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the first thing was we had to, we were introduced actually by Rick Shepro to the person at the HAA who was in charge of new SIG applications. And we had this plan. Actually, our original plan was to be activists in favor of women's empowerment. And we approached, her name is Lauren Brodsky. She was awesome, this woman that used to work for the HAA. And we approached her and said, we've got this plan. Here's the mission that we have. We're going to be activists and try to deploy the Harvard influence all over the world to help women. And she said, well, whoa, slow down there. No activism allowed on the HAA's, in the HAA's name, but you can form a group that comes together around education and networking. So that's the way we went. And that was quite a challenge for us because we had this idea, but that wasn't where we could go. But still, we felt that we could be influential and fruitful by educating and shining a light on the challenges, even if we can't go and be activists. And we figured we could, for lack of a better word, spawn activism. I mean, people might join us and then become so excited about a cause or enraged about something that they would go off and become activists. So we were still doing some good. So that's one challenge. I don't know if Paul wants to talk about it, but we had on one of our very early events some other challenges, some political challenges, and Paul was so diplomatic in addressing those, and so I think, and maybe Rebecca and Paul can both talk about this, we realized that politics was always going to be a challenge for us, and we had to figure out how to work with that and become politically neutral.
So look, Rebecca, let me throw it to you. And if you want to talk about the early political challenges or anything else, tell us a little bit about what you found to be the challenges faced by the group in the early days and how you guys addressed them.
Before politically, I mean, we just had to sort of establish the basics. So we needed a URL, we needed a website. So that's all what I worked on. Just kind of the basics of putting ourselves out there publicly with the SIG and defining the mission. And I think that speaks to the political aspect of this, and what's so difficult for organizations is maintaining, truthness, and we have to stay close to mission, and so developing that mission statement together and keep continuing to hone it, even as we sort of put it out there publicly, was a challenge, just because everybody has different ideas on what the group should do and could do, and the political limitations. And as Julie said, I mean, everything comes down to politics, especially during difficult times. Something that may not seem political, like our event on ISIS and the enslavement of women and girls, today might be considered incredibly political, given what's going on globally and similar situations or difficulties women face in conflict, and how they're treated by combatants, may today be something that would be considered political. But at that point, I think we all agreed as a group that was a very important event to hold. So things do shift with the times and what's considered political, especially when lines are drawn. So we have to be, it's evolving and it's current, and it's important that we stay on top of what's considered political at a given moment.
Yeah. Let me go around the horn on this question because I want to get each of your takes. And Paul, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to finish with Julie. So Rebecca, you'll be in the middle. What are you proudest of that we've achieved with GlobalWE over the last 10 years?
Wow, that's a big question. I think there are so many individual projects that have had a huge amount of success. You know, the essay contest, GlobalWE Connect, you know, every single event is in itself a huge accomplishment. But I think I would go to two things. One, the diversity of what GlobalWE does, which is something that was always kind of central to the idea of what GlobalWE should be. And I think it's really come to fruition in that you have all these different avenues where GlobalWE is pushing education and connection and community, and that's awesome. And then the other thing is perhaps this sounds cliche, but the community that's grown within GlobalWE, I think is really something to be proud of, because, you know, it's people from all over the world, different schools, different backgrounds, and there are real friendships there. There are real accomplishments in terms of what GlobalWE has worked on. But being able to build a community, you know, across the world, largely remote, I think it's a real accomplishment and a testament to all of the work that was put in, you know, by Julie and Rebecca and all of the members since, who we're going to talk to and talk about. Every time I see
Paul
in GlobalWE, I'm just blown away, because it's a really dynamic group.
Great. Rebecca, how about you? What do you, of the things that GlobalWE's accomplished, what are you proudest of?
Well, I'm definitely proud of where it's gone. I mean, since I became an advisory board member and stepped off kind of being so active, I've just seen it flourish, especially during COVID. The conversations have been diverse, wide-ranging, touching on so many topics. In terms of early on, I was really just unbelievably humbled by, again, that event that we held. There was someone from University of Chicago was actually embedded in Sinjar. We had somebody who was, I mean, hiding out, trying to discuss these issues with Yazidi women. And that was, I think, one of the more powerful events that we had. It was on ISIS and the enslavement of Yazidi women. I thought, I mean, that just was something that I was incredibly proud of. And also early on, our event on the trafficking of women in Nepal. And that trafficking obviously continues to be a very difficult and current issue globally. So I'm glad we were able to tackle that sort of early on. And again, I'm looking way back, but I'm so proud of where the organization has gone, and the various areas of the world into which it's reached, to help elevate women's issues globally.
Yeah, the reach is huge. All right, Julie, you now have the tough job of following your two colleagues who've covered a lot of ground. What are you proudest of in the first 10 years with GlobalWE?
Well, I have to say I agree with Paul and Rebecca and everything they said. It's hard to I'll just add to that. I'm proud of the things they're proud of too. But I'll add that I'm really proud of our ability to talk about difficult topics across difficult and different viewpoints. I mean, just before we started, we had one of those conversations. I find those the most gratifying and enlightening, and I'm just proud that we can do that. I feel like we're a family of people who have agreed that women's rights are prior to and above and more important than all politics, and that all cultures and ideologies and all people should care about women's rights. And so I'm proud that we built a community across all kinds of, across the globe, across ideology, across all kinds of different metrics that can come together about something that I think is a basic and important and wide-ranging and worldwide human rights issue.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's one of the things that attracts so many of us to the group, that for all the diversity and all the differences, there is strong agreement on the role of women and women's rights. And this group is, I think its mission is so true to that people gravitate to GlobalWE. I need to wrap up with this panel, I'm told, and we should add to our group comments from Sajida and from Leah and talk about where we're going next and what's in the future for GlobalWE. And I guess I also in that context, I want to add, I'd like to hear a little bit more about, I mean, you guys won a huge, huge, huge award in 2020 for being the outstanding alumni community, outstanding SIG. And that was a wonderful event. I remember I was there. I was early on the advisory board there, but so proud of you guys. So I don't know, Sajid, can I start with you? Or, what was your reaction to that? And how do you think that's impacted GlobalWE going forward?
Thank you, Chuck. It's such a pleasure to be here and wonderful to see everyone. So we got the award in the spring of 2020, and I think it was reflective of everything that had been accomplished in the first few years of GlobalWE. So everything that, Julie, Rebecca, Paul have spoken about is definitely the foundation that has made GlobalWE so strong. When we think about why we won that award that year, I would say it was because of the community that we have built, which is a global community, the way that we operated from the start, which was incredibly inclusive and open to perspectives from different parts of the world, different contexts, and remaining focused on our mission, which can be very challenging. It's a very fine line that we have to walk. And, internally, we have conversations about this all the time around mission creep, around, collaborations, but to ensure synergies and growth. So it was incredibly impactful for us as a SIG to have all of those different pieces of our GlobalWE ecosystem be recognized in receiving that award. Having said all that, when I was thinking about this particular question, I think that we got that award for everything that I've mentioned and my colleagues have mentioned, but in particular for the strong community that we built around the dialogue and the focus and never letting the issue of women's empowerment fall by the wayside.
Thanks. I couldn't agree more. Leah, let me turn to you. You've been so active in the group and you're president now. So let me give you the first opening on where do you see the group going in the next 5 years, 10 years? What is your goal? What track would you like to see the group on?
I would love to see us continue to grow. I think that each following Julie and Sajid, each one made their own contributions and shaped GlobalWE in different ways. And I would like to continue. And granted, our strengths are different and our interests are different. So, Julie just pulled together this whole group of people. You heard all of us referencing her. This is how we came in. Sajida really, really structured us and made everything so clear and official. And I think she's too modest to mention that was probably one of the other reasons, kind of the back end of GlobalWE that we were recognized for, because we could not do all the programming we do without the wonderful structure and baseline foundation that Sajid laid for us. I would like to build on that and work on the community. So I would love to continue to grow our members' participation and also focus on having more men involved with us. We have you and Paul here, which is lovely. We have 2 board members, Eric and Rachel. So really focus on that and enlist them as partners and as colleagues on this, because it's an endeavor that applies to all of us, and we can't do it without them. It's not a women's empowerment. It's not a women's issue. I think it's
it's a societal issue.
Yeah.
And to the extent men are involved in society and in any way, we should probably be cognizant and appreciative of the role that women can. I agree with you completely on that. Let me ask this. I'll switch to you, Julie. What do you see as the future challenges and the future opportunities for women's GlobalWE? Sorry, for Harvard GlobalWE.
Well, I think, everybody won't be surprised to hear me say this. I think the big challenge is mission creep and the continuing constant challenge of politics. I continue to believe that women's rights are prior to politics. No culture, no political ideology can be an excuse for abuse of or denial of freedom and education and rights to women. And I think we routinely come up against that as we move forward. And so the big challenge is, how do we move forward without letting politics blow us up? And I think because we all have so much respect for one another and for one another's points of view, and we really we love each other, the ones who are actively involved, that we won't let that happen. But it's a challenge. And so I guess my wish for the future is that we stay with our mission, we stay with our goal of talking across the political and ideological spectrum, and always prioritizing and putting women's rights first. And also that we keep our focus on global women's rights, not, we're a Harvard institution. Sometimes we tend to sort of drift back to a US focus. I would hate to see that happen.
Yeah. So I didn't ask this of the two new panelists of Leah and Sajida, and I want to get back to it. What events in the past do you think were most successful, and do you think we can replicate those or do similar things in the future? Sajida, why don't I start with you? What are the events that we did before that you think we should be doing more of?
So I think that there's honestly so many that have been outstanding, but I will name a few of that are my top favorites, and for different reasons. I think primarily because they display very clearly, they illustrate the diversity that Paul spoke of, and our openness to conversation across multiple contexts and areas. So I think that, our roundtables, which we try to do on an annual basis, have been in a tradition, have given us a great forum for these kinds of discussions. So we do them on an annual basis, but two topics in particular resonated with me on a personal level, just because of the nature of the conversations that they engendered. So the first was a roundtable we did, which I think was our very first roundtable, around sexual harassment, assault, misconduct, and the Me Too movement. And, we did it on campus, and it was brilliant. It was done, it literally was a roundtable, and the conversation and the awareness it provided to us as GlobalWE in terms of fodder for future thought and programming, but also the conversations that it continued to foster on campus, I think had very long-standing positive impact. So that's one that definitely resonates with me. Another is the roundtable we did that was entitled "From Foot Binding and High Heels to Burqas and Bikinis, the Complex Relationship Between Clothing and Women's Oppression, Exploitation and Empowerment." I mean, it's a very long-winded title, but it speaks volumes, again, to, what restricts and inhibits women, but also what can empower women when it comes to how we appear and how we, are able to position ourselves. So those particular roundtables, in addition to the other ones we've had, really had very particularly powerful messaging and very powerful, resonance and impact. I think I just want to add that, the Nepal event that Rebecca mentioned around trafficking also was a huge favorite for me, because it was an old professor of mine that we brought to the table, and something that I had studied when I was at Harvard. So it kind of brought things full circle in a sense, but also then it brought us into a different context in terms of, what that particular realm of work is. It's a geographic, unfortunately, it happens across multiple geographies, but in this case, we saw what happened in this particular context. And again, there were lessons and impact that could be applied. And then a favorite that was much more upbeat and sort of fun was the discussion we had with the Kung Fu nuns. There's this incredible group of women that are working, and what they do, and they're nuns, but they're Kung Fu nuns. And their story was so powerful, because they have taken what others might find a constraining situation and actually made it incredibly empowering, which 100% speaks to the mission of GlobalWE. So I think that those are just some of the events that particularly come to mind. I also want to just highlight one thing. The pandemic for many organizations, SIGs, clubs, was inhibiting. I think for GlobalWE, it was empowering. We were already remote. We were already doing events, via Zoom and so forth. We precursed that way before the pandemic. And the pandemic was a time when I think our community was able to hold strong grow and also provide strength to each other, because we remain connected, and we were already connected in a way. So while others struggle to sort of get to this remote mode, we were way ahead, thanks to our global board and our communication protocols that were already in existence. So we continue to hold outstanding events, which not only inspired our community, but also reminded everyone that we remain connected. So, and even during the pandemic, we launched our first ever virtual expo, which was very exciting. So our board was exceptional, and I think that we were there for each other in our community, which again speaks very much to the ethos of GlobalWE. And while we are event driven, I think we're community based.
Excellent. I was going to ask Leah, what about you? Are there particular events that you thought were successful in the past that you'd like to see replicated and reiterated in the future? Themes you like.
I'm totally on board with the Kung Fu Nuns. That would have been my most memorable event as well. But I'd like to do a shout out to our established programs, the essay contest and the expos, which we have. They've continued. They draw a lot of support. People are really inspired by the essays that our contestants write. And also then with our expo, it's grown into it started out as almost like a job fair for volunteers, for students, right? On campus to volunteer with nonprofits, was how Paul had envisioned it. And then now our Barbara and Anna have expanded it. So now there's a community of the expo organization. So yeah, so those continuing and established programs, I'd like to give a shout out to. And then our new one, our discussion circle, the first one we had was last fall, and we wanted something that would allow us to respond quickly to current events. And our first, and it still took a few months before we actually had them, depending on the event. But our Iran discussion after, with the protests, the women's protests in Iran, it was amazing because we had people, and not necessarily from the Harvard community, but who somehow heard about our event, who were able to educate us and inspire us and give us ways to help. To empower us to assist, right? To do something about it, not just to listen and then go on our way. So we had another one after that, and we are looking forward to more. And I think that's a really crucial element, not just like this, where you're being our poor members are being spoken at, right? But that they actually got to participate.
They'll get their chance to ask questions very soon. I've got one more question for each of you, and then I think we'll probably open it up to all of our members. So, those of you who are on and have been good enough to listen to us and develop questions of your own, please put them in the chat, put them in the comments, and we'll get to those in about 4 or 5 minutes. But here's the question I had. We're a Harvard organization, and the lifeblood of this is new Harvard alums or Harvard students coming in and saying, I want to participate. I want to be a part of this. And, I've been to some of your events on campus. There was one with those women who had started that news organization, which was, I thought, brilliant.
Yeah.
And that really, to me, that really just resonated. And it was a room full of people. And there were a lot of familiar faces, but there are also a lot of students who were just there and getting their first experience with GlobalWE. I'm just curious, what strategies, and Julie, I'll start with you and just go around the horn, but what do you think are the best ways to bring in new students, new alumni, new members to the group and add their fresh thoughts and fresh impressions?
Well, I actually think what you're referring to is probably the best way. Hands-on, person-to-person, on-campus events are really wonderful ways to engage students who then shortly after that become alums. I mean, our first, Paul was a student when he was, and Benyana were students when they first started. And then we had a progression of really amazing students who later joined us as alumni participants. Big shout out to Kendall as one of our fabulous early student liaisons, who's now an integral and important member of our board. I hope I'm not missing anyone else who's a student that I've forgotten. That's just what came to mind. But we have, I think it's a challenge to get students involved, especially because we are mostly remote. But I think we've had great success through the expo through the roundtables, through any in-person activities on campus.
Yeah. So, Judy, what are your thoughts?
So I think we have a couple of advantages, definitely doing the events on campus. And then we partner with a number of entities on campus, like through the college, through the Career Services Office, who help us. We also are one of the very, very few SIGs that actually have a student group registered on campus, which, as a student group goes, we support them in whatever way we can. We actually encourage them to be a member of the board, the student group leadership. We support them, and we guide them to make sure that their events are focused on our mission. But obviously that is a good place to get awareness about GlobalWE on campus, and then also to engage, new students who can then join us once they become alum and join GlobalWE as full-fledged members. I think one other thing that we're trying to do more actively, which we discovered during the pandemic was a good source, was to not just speak to the college, but also speak to the graduate schools.
Right.
Because that's a way to get awareness, getting into their newsletters. Harvard is amazing, but it is a bit decentralized. So you have to go to the different schools to get the information out and to get the communication happening. So I think those are, in addition to the in-person, it's really about making sure that the messaging about GlobalWE, because our events are not just open to alum, they're open to students as well. So, we want to make sure the students are aware of this, and they can join remotely most of the time. So it's relatively convenient and easy for them to do so. So I think it's about that. It's about, supporting our student group, but also getting the messaging out on campus that we exist. And we'd be happy to have you participate with us. And one last thing we also participate in is the Global Day of Service on campus, where we can recruit volunteers that are students. And then hopefully that gets them hooked into GlobalWE. And then they want to participate with us also as they become alum.
That's great. Leah, do you have any other thoughts on how we can boost student involvement and bring in new alums?
I think they've covered, between Julie and Sajida, they've covered, our main venues. I will add that I think our mission is very attractive, and what we've just been discussing this too, is how do we distinguish ourselves? By staying true to our mission and about mission, we don't replicate the events and the programming that there's so many groups competing for the students' attention, right? So we want to make sure we stay focused and offer them what we do best, which is, educate and propose, make sure that women's empowerment is at the front. I think
those are all great. Also, I know how hard it is to follow both Julie and Sajida as you speak, so I'm sorry to put you in that space, but I was just going sort of chronologically. So at this point, I think I'd like to throw it open, and if people have questions or they want to make comments, I think the chat is open, and we'd love to hear from you. We've got all of our panelists back. We've got Paul and Rebecca back as well.
Yeah.
I have a question. What topics do you envision having events on in the upcoming 6-12 months? What topics are you yourself currently following on social media or academically or personally? So let us know.
I'm happy to take that one to start. I think, especially given what's been going on recently, that we should be doing an event on the use of sexual violence against women in contexts of war. And we have addressed this before. Our ISIS event that Rebecca referred to earlier was
our Nigeria event also.
Right, our Nigeria event. And it's long been my wish. If anybody on this call knows how to reach him, it's long been my wish to somehow feature Dennis Mukwege from the DRC in an event, because he's won a Nobel Prize and a Harvard Medal for his work serving women who've been sexually violated in theaters of war. So I would love to see an event around him.
I think just to add to that, it's kind of a difficult question to answer, because GlobalWE does like to remain topical. So, we tend to look at kind of what is happening, what are the current issues of conversation, and then, see where there's an opportunity for a discussion and dialogue or learning around women's empowerment related issues. So, I mean, I agree with Julie, the issue of how women are treated during conflict situations and how they are abused or misused, what's used against them is definitely currently very topical. There's multiple and unfortunately issues around the world where women are bearing this. But then there's also the lighter side of things. I mean, I'd love to see how we have a conversation around, the norms of what is considered normal for a 17-year-old in the US versus a 17-year-old in, Turkey or even the UK or India, so a conversation around sort of what are cultural norms. I'd love to have a deeper dive. We've discussed this many times about how women are within the gaming industry and the gaming sector, because that's becoming so popular. So I think that the platform that we have in GlobalWE allows us to have that flexibility as long as we remain true to our mission. So the topics can be anything, frankly, as long as we remain true to our mission. And that's what makes it particularly exciting.
So we've got a couple questions in the chat, and let me read. They both kind of relate to the same, the mission creep, etc. And so let me do my best to paraphrase them. But one's from Kelly Glauberman, one's from Julie McIntosh Shapiro, and the questions, both of them talk about how do you deal with the events that have occurred in the last 10 years and how they have changed over time, over the last 10 years. And Kelly asks about it in terms of mission creep, and Julie asks a little bit more about, how do you deal with these new events and how do women fare in the new circumstances? I will throw this open to any of you because I think you all have interesting ideas on this, and I don't want to pick anyone. Whoever thinks this is a good topic. I think it's a good topic.
I don't know if this exactly answers the question, but I want to highlight one thing that did, I think it's maybe closer to Julie's question, that something that did occur. We have this essay contest and the essay contest allows students around the world to respond to the question, what is the biggest challenge facing women and girls in your country today? And a young woman answered, won the award from Afghanistan several years ago, and this is what I'm answering it because Julie asked what has transpired from the events, and what happened with her was because she won the contest, she was able, and she says this, that the credential of winning the contest allowed her to go to school in Canada. And when the Afghanistan when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan and it was hard to get people out, she, over the course of time, through this ability, through living in Canada and her ability to connect with people in Canada, was able to extract her family from Afghanistan and get them out. And so I feel like at least, some of the things that we have done have had real, not just educational and networking impacts, but real life, real world consequences that have helped women in their own lives. And that's just one example. So I don't know if that exactly addresses mission creep, but it addresses how our events have impacted people over time.
This was sort of an overarching question that we've dealt with in other ways, but have events over the last 10 years changed the focus in any way for the group? And I'll throw this one open too. I mean, any of you can answer that. I
can jump in. So the main thing for us is that we are true to our mission, which is around, dialogue. So that, like I said, the topic can vary because it's, looking at it from the lens of women's empowerment and what we can do to bring awareness, or how we can highlight a particular group that's already sort of exhibiting awareness. For example, the Kung Fu nuns, they for us, it was more like, let's learn about how these women have overcome what we might perceive as barriers from within their own context to actually, get out there. So topics have varied. And I think that is the advantage we have as GlobalWE, is that we look at our mission and say, okay, our focus is on bringing dialogue to the area issues of empowerment for women, and who do we need to engage in this dialogue? What's happening globally today where we should highlight something or we should bring attention to it to have a conversation around it? And with what impact can this have by either influencing someone to take more interest in this, or providing support, like our expo, the organizations that participate with us, and the participants who come, the people who are actually participating in the expo, they might choose to then become a volunteer for that organization. So, which, again, supports our mission of bringing awareness and building dialogue around the area of empowerment. So our topics are diverse. That's actually the beauty of GlobalWE, but always remembering to bring a focus around dialogue around women's empowerment and the issues that impact that particular large umbrella of focus.
Okay. Rebecca, do you have your hand up, or were you just?
No, I was just listening to everyone, but again, I've been impressed with how the organization has continued to expand globally with its events. I would say the activism is an interesting question, because the word empowerment in and of itself, in some parts of the world, women's empowerment might be considered political. So there's always a fine line, there's always a lens, and there's always a line we're walking when it comes to that issue. It's never necessarily clear cut.
And on that issue, Chuck, I think, I can't, and directly to Kelly's question, as a member now and no longer being on the board, I think I'm very kind of proud of the way that mission has developed, and whether or not this was initially intended, the value, I think there's real value in an organization like GlobalWE, and that's in addition to activist groups and people who are more directly engaged on the ground. Especially when you're talking about an alumni group, I think the educational dialogue focus makes a lot of sense. I was on Harvard campus recently for a reunion weekend, and there was a GlobalWE event, and this topic came up because, as we've talked about throughout the panel, and Rebecca just mentioned, certain aspects of this are inherently political, but women's empowerment also means different things to different people, and I think, especially talking to young alumni, there's such an explosion of activism, and that's so much a part of, I think, how Harvard alums see themselves now, that there is a little bit of pushback here and there, but I think it's important to remember that just like one person can't and shouldn't be everything to everyone in their lives, an organization doesn't have to be everything, and there are different roles in the ecosystem of global women's empowerment, right? And so I think GlobalWE forms a really valuable node, to take a term that Barbara talks a lot about in the GlobalWE Connect context. I think that's really important. And if you're an activist and you want to be involved with GlobalWE, that's great. We've had events with activists before. It'll be in a context that's based on dialogue and based on education, rather than pure advocacy. But it takes kind of all types of people being involved with these issues and engaged with these issues. And I think GlobalWE is a really important kind of space for those things, in large part because of trying to stay focused on that mission.
That's great. Look, it has been an honor to have each of you to speak with today. It's been an honor to be affiliated and part of this group. And we always have fun when we get together in person. I always enjoy reading the global essays, the GlobalWE essay book that come out. I think those are phenomenal. I congratulate you all heartily on what you've built over the last 10 years. I can't wait to see what you do in the next 10 years. And I'm going to turn it over because I think it's time for the vice president of GlobalWE to get a little time with the group. Barbara Barreño-Pachal is a good friend, is a member of the board with me in the Harvard Club of Chicago, and is a recently elected director to the Harvard Alumni Association. Barbara, I turn it over to you with full confidence. It's in great hands.
Thank you so much, Chuck, and thank you all for being here today. I for one say that this was an amazing event. I learned so much, and I just have such great respect and admiration for everyone who helped make GlobalWE what it is today. And really, Julie, Sajida, Leah, Paul, Rebecca, everyone, it's just incredible to be in your presence, and I really thank you all. And Chuck, of course, thank you so much for moderating this fantastic discussion. We really count on you to be there for us in many ways, as you mentioned, from legal to advisory, and by moderating today, it really is wonderful. Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and for those who are here, definitely continue to stay involved. I know several of you are involved already. We have board members here, we have longtime volunteers, and keep it up because we want to hear your ideas. We want to continue to grow GlobalWE, as you've heard today, and make it an even stronger and more impactful SIG that reaches the entire world. Like, our goal is global, and we really could use your help to do that. We have a couple of exciting events coming up, including a fireside chat on Wednesday, November 29th. This topic will be on women's peace and security, and the speaker is Maria Victoria Madec Cabrera Vallesa, the founder and chief executive officer of GNWP, which is a convener, collaborator, advocate, and leader in the global movement for women's rights, gender equality, and sustainable peace. So that event is coming up on November 29th. There will be a link in the chat, and also check your email for that. As Anna Butasova mentioned in our chat, there's a GlobalWE Expo coming up, a Women's Empowerment Expo in 2024, and we'll be giving more details about that, as well as other discussions and other opportunities to contribute, and a holiday social. So keep looking for those events in your email account. And if you haven't joined GlobalWE officially as a member, please do so at our website, harvardglobalwe.org. And there's always ways for you to support, from being a volunteer to other ways. And we really would welcome that support any way you can provide it. And on behalf of the GlobalWE board, we just thank you again for coming and being part of this outstanding 10th anniversary event. And thank you again to all the panelists, to Chuck, and to everyone for being here for what was a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.